They called her Granny Janitor, with her stooped shoulders, mop bucket, and thinning grey hair. Private Taylor and his buddies barely noticed her shuffling through the barracks. Just a cleaning lady, they thought. A harmless old woman, invisible among their youth and pride. Some snickered, some made jokes. One even left muddy boots on purpose, watching her scrub the floor in silence. She never said a word, until the day her uniform sleeve shifted, and a Marine Corps tattoo peeked out. It wasn't just any ink. It was an eagle, globe, and anchor, wrapped in a ribbon of names. Names of the fallen. Silence fell. Laughter stopped, because suddenly, she wasn't a janitor anymore. She was a veteran, a warrior, a real war hero. This is the true story of Staff Sergeant Eleanor Briggs, a name you won't find in textbooks. She cleaned floors while carrying memories of battlefield courage, soldier sacrifice, and unspeakable loss. And when her story finally surfaced, even the base commander stood at attention. Today, we honor the forgotten. This is a military tribute to an unsung hero who proved that sometimes the strongest warriors are the quietest ones in the room. Fort Irwin, California. Home to desert heat, dust, and soldiers preparing for deployments they'd rather not talk about. Inside the base, where routine drills echoed off the walls and mess halls buzzed with activity, one figure passed through, the background like a whisper, the janitor. She came every morning before sunrise, old boots, standard coveralls, a faded mop in one hand, cleaning supplies in the other. Most soldiers didn't even know her name. To them, she was just Granny Janitor, a joke, a background character. Private First Class Jordan Taylor was among those who barely noticed her. Fresh out of basic training, full of energy, pride, and sarcasm, Granny's back at it. He'd laugh as she passed by quietly, head down, working around muddy footprints and spilled coffee. Sometimes, the guys left extra mess just to see if she'd react. She never did. She didn't speak, didn't correct, them didn't flinch, just kept scrubbing. There were rumors. Someone said she was part of the cleaning contract staff. Someone else thought she might be the widow of a former Marine. But nobody asked. And honestly, nobody cared. Until one scorching afternoon in July. Taylor had just wrapped a weapons drill and headed back into the air-conditioned barracks. Tossing his helmet onto the bunk, he turned a corner and nearly collided with the janitor, muttered an apology, and as she moved past him, the edge of her sleeve caught on the mop handle. It rolled up, revealing the inside of her forearm. There it was, a faded but unmistakable Marine Corps tattoo. The eagle, globe, and anchor below it. 5 names inked in solemn cursive. Names of the fallen. Taylor froze. He wasn't sure what he was seeing. Hey, is that real? He asked without thinking. She paused, turned slowly, her eyes steel, gray and unwavering, locked with his sand. In that moment, something shifted. She wasn't just a janitor anymore. She was a Marine. From that moment, word spread. By evening, soldiers were whispering about it in the mess hall. She's got a tattoo. Legit USMC. Briggs. Her name's Briggs. Staff Sergeant. Maybe. No way. She's like 70. But the whispers grew. Corporal Diaz, a military history buff, did some digging. Quietly. Respectfully. What he found stunned them all. Eleanor Briggs. United States Marine Corps. Served in 1968 to 1991. 3 tours. 2 Bronze Stars. 1 Purple Heart. The same woman who scrubbed their showers had once led a fire team through hostile jungles in Vietnam. She'd dragged wounded Marines under fire. She'd survived ambushes. She'd watched friends die. She had earned that tattoo, and every scar beneath it. And yet, for years, she had worked in silence. No fanfare, no rank, no recognition. That night, Private Taylor couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her footsteps in his mind. Soft, steady, and far heavier than he ever understood. This is the beginning of Staff Sergeant Briggs. Story 1 that speaks of inspirational military sacrifice, emotional storytelling, and the quiet strength of forgotten heroes. In a base full of shouting and marching, her silence echoed louder than most voices ever could. The next morning, the janitor arrived as usual. Same coveralls, same worn-out boots, same quiet shuffle. But something was different. The halls that were once filled with careless banter had gone quiet. Soldiers stood a little straighter as she passed. Some nodded, some stepped aside. Private Taylor, who once scoffed at her presence, now found himself standing at attention when she entered. She didn't say a word, but the silence she walked through was filled with newfound respect. Taylor, couldn't shake it. He kept replaying the tattoo in his mind. The names, the years, the rumors. It didn't add up. Why would a decorated Marine work as a janitor? He had to know. So he approached her during lunch hour. "Ma'am," he said softly, "my name's Jordan Taylor. I wanted to say I didn't know. I mean, I didn't understand before. About you. About your service." She looked up from her mop bucket. Her eyes studied him for a moment. Then, she smiled. "Young man," she said, "respect isn't owed, it's earned. And sometimes, it's quiet." That line stuck with him forever. Over the next few weeks, Briggs became more than a mystery. She became a lesson. The soldiers started noticing the little things. How she moved with a limp, favoring her right leg. How she paused sometimes near the flagpole, eyes distant. How she carried herself with quiet purpose, even in the smallest tasks. It was Diaz who found an old photo online. A black and white shot of a young Eleanor Briggs in full combat gear, crouched beside a wounded soldier, radio in one hand, rifle in the other. She wasn't cleaning barracks in that photo. She was saving lives. One evening, Taylor mustered the courage to ask her the question that had been burning inside him. Why here? Why come back to a place like this and mop floors? She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the flag lowering for the day, the sound of retreat echoing faintly through the air. "I lost 5 good men under my command," she said at last. 5 boys. All younger than you. They didn't get to come home. I did. And for a while, that felt like a punishment." She wiped her eyes. "I didn't come back to clean. I came back to remember. To walk the halls they never could. To remind myself that even the quiet jobs still matter." Taylor didn't speak. He couldn't. Because in that moment, Granny Janitor became Staff Sergeant Briggs again. A woman carrying not just a mop, but the weight of war and remembrance. Word of her story reached the base commander. He ordered her personnel file pulled from archives, and sure enough, 3 tours in Vietnam, combat commendations, Bronze Stars for Valor. She'd led Marines under gunfire while barely out of her 20s. She'd been wounded in a firefight that wiped out her entire squad, refused evacuation, stayed behind to call for air support, saved a unit trapped behind enemy lines. And yet, when her service ended, the world moved on. There were no parades, no medals in glass cases, only silence, and the heavy burden of survivors. Guilt. This was the depth behind the woman no one had bothered to ask about. This was the reality behind the quiet smile and the mop bucket. She wasn't forgotten by history, she was erased by it. Because some heroes don't seek attention, some carry their battles in silence. And some, like Briggs, choose to serve. Long after the war has ended, through humble work, through dignity, and through memory. As Taylor walked back to the barracks that night, he glanced over his shoulder. There she was, scrubbing the floor by the mess hall. Alone, but never again invisible. This section of the story honors the emotional storytelling and soldier sacrifice behind the quiet veterans we too often overlook. It's a military tribute, not just to what Eleanor Briggs did in combat, but what she continued to do in peace. The shift didn't happen overnight, but day by day, Fort Irwin began to feel different. Not because orders changed, not because of some official announcement, but because of one woman's quiet legacy. The soldiers no longer saw Granny Janitor. They saw Staff Sergeant Briggs, a symbol of resilience, battlefield courage, and humility. It started small. Private Taylor stopped leaving his boots scattered across the floor. Corporal Diaz made it a point to greet her with good morning, Staff Sergeant, even when she said nothing back. Others followed. Soon, even the young recruits, the ones who used to smirk, began calling her ma'am. Briggs didn't smile much, but her eyes softened. She didn't need their praise, but she appreciated their silence, a kind that wasn't ignorant this time, but reverent. One afternoon, something unusual happened. A group of Marines from another base came to Fort Irwin for joint exercises. They saw the old janitor pushing her cart down the corridor and chuckled. "What's with the grandma?" one of them asked, loud enough for Taylor to hear. Before Briggs could even react, Taylor stepped in. "That's Staff Sergeant Eleanor Briggs, United States Marine Corps. 3 tours, 2 Bronze Stars, and more guts than all of us combined." The room went quiet. Briggs gave Taylor a long look. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The respect between warriors was already spoken. Eventually, word spread beyond the barracks. A young officer, Lieutenant Hargrove, approached her with hesitation one morning. "Ma'am," he said, awkwardly holding his coffee, "I read about Firebase Hunter. You were there." When the ridge was overrun, she looked up at him slowly, a long pause, then a nod. "That day, you saved 24 lives," he said. "My uncle, he was one of them." For the first time, tears welled in her eyes. She reached out, touched his sleeve gently. "Then I did something right." The base commander decided it was time to act. He quietly scheduled a meeting with Veteran Services, and then, without warning, called an all-hands assembly. Rows of soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder on the parade field, confused and squinting in the sunlight. Then, through the crowd, she appeared, walking slowly, flanked by 2 Marines in dress blues. She wasn't holding a mop. She wore her old uniform, faded, slightly too loose now, but still sharp, still proud. Pinned to her chest were the same medals from decades ago, bronze stars, Purple Heart, and a ribbon with a small gold star. Real, earned, respected. The commander stepped forward. "Many of you have passed Staff Sergeant Briggs in the halls. You may have called her Janitor, but long before she scrubbed floors, she walked through hell for her country. And for years, she's honored this base, not with rank, but with humility." He turned to her. "On behalf of Fort Irwin, and on behalf of a nation that too often forgets its finest, we thank you." Applause, thunderous, sustained. No one looked away. Many had tears in their eyes. This was emotional storytelling unfolding in real time, a military tribute that no ceremony could fake. Later that night, someone hung a framed photo in the barracks hallway. It was Briggs, young and in combat gear, the same one Diaz had found. Beneath it, a simple brass plaque. "Staff Sergeant Eleanor Briggs, real war hero. She fought for us before we were born, and walked among us unseen. Until now." Things kept changing. Briggs was offered a formal Veterans Advisor position. She declined. "I'm happy with the mop." She smiled. "I like keeping things clean. Order matters." But she allowed one exception. She began speaking to recruits during orientation. In those rooms, you could hear a pin drop. She told stories without dramatics. No blood and guts. No speeches. Just truth. Loss. Brotherhood. The cost of silence. The unsung heroes who never came home. And when she spoke, even the toughest Marines leaned forward. Because this was not just a tale. This was truth from the trenches. Briggs never asked for thanks. But she taught a generation of soldiers what true service looked like. Not glory. Not medals. But quiet sacrifice. The kind that lingers long after the shooting stops. Section 3 is your inspirational military heartbeat, where the base culture changes. One humbled heart at a time. It's where real war heroes become legends, not by shouting, but by simply being seen. Winter came to Fort Irwin. The wind howled across the Mojave, kicking dust into every crevice, biting at the skin beneath uniforms. But every morning, just like always, she was there. Staff Sergeant Eleanor Briggs. Mop in one hand, duty in the other. The soldiers had grown used to her presence, not as background, but as bedrock. When recruits got rowdy, someone would say, "Don't embarrass yourselves in front of the sergeant." When morale dipped, Briggs would drop a quiet line, "Chin up." A good Marine never forgets how to stand tall, even when no one's watching. Then, one Friday morning, she didn't show up. At first, they thought she was just late. Then, noon passed. Then dinner. Taylor asked the supply office. Diaz checked the clinic. No one had seen her. It was Lieutenant Hargrove, who drove to the small trailer just outside base, the one with the wind chimes and worn American flag on the porch. He knocked. "Don't answer." Just silence. He called the base. Emergency services responded. Inside she lay in bed, peaceful still, her medals neatly arranged on her nightstand. An envelope rested on her chest, addressed to Fort Irwin's sons and daughters. Inside a note written in her unmistakable, deliberate hand. "I served with warriors. I cleaned floors for their children. I leave this world quietly, like many who never came back. Keep your boots clean, and your hearts cleaner. Staff SGTE Briggs, USMC Ret." The news hit the base like a shell blast. No one had expected it. No formal farewell. No request for attention. Just gone. But silence was never empty when it came to Briggs. It was full of memory, sacrifice, and quiet, endless duty. Within days, something extraordinary happened. Private Taylor, Corporal Diaz, Lieutenant Hargrove, and nearly 100 others petitioned the Department of Defense. They wanted the main training barracks renamed, not after a general, not after a battle, but after a janitor, a forgotten hero, who taught them what service really meant. 2 months later, the sign was raised. Briggs Hall, in honor of Staff Sergeant Eleanor. Briggs Marine, mentor, memory keeper. Her funeral was held in Arlington. They gave her full military honors. Flag-draped coffin, rifle salute, bugle. Men who once laughed, now stood with tears streaming down their cheeks. The chaplain read the names tattooed on her arm. And when the final volley fired, Taylor whispered, "Tell them we remember, ma'am. Tell them we carry it now." Years later, a new generation of soldiers walk the halls of Briggs Hall. They see her photo. They ask her story, and it gets told again and again. About the janitor, who was a Marine. The cleaner who was a savior. The woman who proved that battlefield courage doesn't end with war. It lives on in silence, in service, and in sacrifice. This was more than a military tribute. It was a reminder that some of the bravest heroes wear no rank, that the strongest voices often whisper, and that legacy isn't built by medals. It's carved into the hearts of those you quietly protect. If this story moved you, share it. Let the world remember the Eleanor Briggs in your life, the quiet warriors, the unseen protectors, the real war heroes we must never forget.